Today, a completely honest review of the Tumbler Sharpener system, which is a rolling sharpener system. Let's see if it works. Full disclosure, this is not a paid ad, and I bought this with my own money. I've never even talked to this company. The only time we've ever exchanged anything is when I paid 100 of my dollars for this product. Now, if you're anything like me, over the years, you've accumulated a ton of sharpening systems. I have, throughout the years, always fought with trying to figure out the best way to keep my knives sharp. I do have a sharpening video in my back catalog where I talk about this particular sharpening system, which is just whetstones. I also talked about these as well, gave them a quick review, but I spent most of my time talking about the best way to sharpen your knives using stones. Okay, so here are some knives. As you can see, I have a variety of knives. I'm just going to pick one of these knives to open it up. This particular system uses a magnet, and it holds the knife in place with that magnet. So this is the magnet. It has a 15-degree and a 20-degree magnet side, and then it also comes with a diamond sharpening stone on one side and a sharpening steel on the other. The instructions are pretty simple. It says to connect the knife to the block, set it at its proper angle, and then just roll the sharpening stone alongside it. So all my knives, which mostly are carbon steel, will be okay to sharpen with this. Now, I don't have any stainless steel knives, but I know that there are some people who have stainless steel knives that I saw online. Some of these magnets are very difficult depending on the magnetism or the ability to be attracted to a magnet that your stainless steel has. It may or may not hold on to this. So something to consider, especially if you're using a material that isn't just carbon steel.
I figure the only real way to do this is to test this against a sharpening stone system that I already use. I have two identical knives. Well, they're close to identical. This one here has a broken handle, so I replaced it years ago, but I did keep the knife itself. So these are two Wüsthof 8-inch chef knives that I have, one with a slightly broken handle, but they are identical blades. So this is a good test to see which sharpening system works best, or if they both work adequately. Now for this test, the sharpening stones, the ones I am familiar with, are going to be used to sharpen the one with the broken handle. This knife is very rarely used, sits in my drawer, and is quite dull. So it is the one that is going to have the uphill battle to be sharp. So I'm making sure to use that one for the sharpening stones. The other knife, the one that is intact, will be used with the tumbler system. All right, so how does this thing work? Well, on one side of this magnet, you have a 20-degree angle. The other side, you have a 15-degree angle. What that does is it sets the angle for the stone so it can sharpen at the proper angle at all times. Then this roller has a diamond sharpening stone on the end of it, and it just stays perpendicular to the surface, and then you just roll it back and forth, and it will sharpen, keeping that angle. Once it finishes sharpening, turn the stone around, and it has a honing steel on the other side, which you use to remove the burr. So as you can see here, you connect the knife to the proper angle side of the magnet, making sure the back of the knife is firm against a flat surface. Then you just roll this sharpening stone back and forth for the proper amount of time. The manual says the first time you do this, you should do it for 5 minutes on each side. So that's what I did. I rolled this thing back and forth for several minutes on each side. There's a couple of things that I am not crazy about. One is that the blade is sticking straight up in the air. This is a pretty dangerous position to have any blade in the kitchen, especially if you have little kids or animals or things you can trip on in your kitchen. Genuinely not a good idea to store your knives in any way that the blade is sticking straight up in the air. That being said, most sharpening systems, they require your blade to be in a position that may cut you. So most of the time, you are being very, very careful and paying attention to what you're doing. But still not crazy about how this blade sits straight up in the air. Another thing I'm not terribly crazy about is that the blade itself, as you roll it, flexes. There's just no way to get around that. So I started putting the magnet closer to the middle of the blade, but often I still had to hold the tip of the knife in place so that it would stay in contact with the roller the entire time. If I didn't do that, then it would come away from the roller as I rolled it toward it. It would bend away from it. So lots of times I have to hold this in a pretty uncomfortable way. The knife gets flipped around to the other side, and you continue on with the sharpening process. Now, as you can see, this is taking some metal off the blade. You can see it on my fingers. So I know it is working. Now it's really hard to show here, but there is a slight burr on the blade. There's a lot of filings attached to this blade, as you can see in this photo. Once both sides were adequately sharpened, I flipped the stone over and used the honing steel side of the stone, basically rolling it back and forth, removing any burr, and honing the steel like a regular honing rod you would normally use on a knife. Now, setting up the stones does take a lot more work. I have to first soak the stones, and they have to sit in that water for about 10 minutes to make sure that they are fully saturated. Then I normally have to wet a towel and lay it flat on my cutting board so I can set a sheet pan on that. The stones will sit on top of this block inside of this sheet pan. Then I'll wet them occasionally. So in order to not make a huge mess, I normally do it inside of a sheet pan so that if I pour water and it dribbles off, no big deal. Also, as you sharpen knives on a stone, it will create a slurry. That is metal filings and some of the stone that is coming off the sharpening stone itself. This sort of messy grit gets all over the place, so it's nice to have it in one contained place. If you say anything about sharpening stones, I will say this: they're messy as hell. The stones themselves also require you to go through more steps. I have a 400, a 1000, a 3000, and an 800 grit stone. Now that's only 2 stones, but it's one side for each number. The lower the grit, the harder the stone. I normally use all 4 stones when I sharpen a knife, so it is going to take just longer. There's no way to get around that. Using the sharpening stones took me 18 minutes. It only took me 12 minutes with the Tumbler system. But according to Tumbler, down the road, as I try to hone my knives in the future, it should only take a couple of minutes, because really one of the major things that they're suggesting is that your knives don't have a proper angle on them. And once they have a proper angle, they'll be much easier to sharpen. I can't really test that this soon, but I do promise a follow-up video. Sharpening on stones does have some major negatives. Like I said, it's messy, and holding your arm locked like this and constantly trying to keep that angle is frustrating and difficult. I guarantee that if I did it all the time, it would be a lot easier, but I don't sharpen my knives all the time. I sharpen them like once every 6 months. So the muscle memory for this, I have to basically remind myself how to do it each time. And keeping your arm locked like this keeps it cramped. Now, that doesn't mean that the Tumbler system is 100% better. The Tumbler system has a short barrel, so I have to keep my pinky up when I roll because my hands are too big for it. So it gets a little cramped too. But if it takes less time, it's less cramping. And the Tumbler system takes less time. So now it's time to test these knives. I'm going to be testing them against a knife I know is laser sharp. This is a brand new knife that was given to me at Christmas, and I rarely use it. I really only use it for the channel. It was a gift from my buddy Tom, and it was a custom-made knife, and it is absolutely the sharpest knife in my kitchen. For this test, I'm just going to cut a tomato. For the first part, I just used the knife weight and dragged it across the tomato. As you can see, the custom knife cuts almost all the way through with one drag of the blade. Next, I used the one that was sharpened on the stones, and then finally, the one that was sharpened with the Tumbler system. To me, feels like the Tumbler was a touch sharper. Then I cut some slices. It cut very well, but I wanted to see how well it would do if I wasn't touching the tomato. So I cut a bunch of slices off, laid it on its edge, and then just used the knife itself to cut across to see if it would work. All 3 knives did exceedingly well, cut off paper-thin pieces of tomato without me even holding on to the tomato itself. They just cut directly through it. So I could not tell a discernible difference between the one that was done on the Tumbler system and the one that was done on my stone system. In fact, both of them cut well enough that I would be hard-pressed to say that they weren't as sharp or close to as sharp as the professionally sharpened brand new knife I have. So I gotta say, the Tumbler system works fine.
So that is the Tumbler Sharpener system. I feel like there are some certain pluses to this system. I think the ease in which it allows me to sharpen knives is great. I'm still not crazy about the knife itself sticking straight up in the air, but after doing it, I do realize that that's probably just my lizard brain screaming at me, hey, you probably shouldn't have a knife sitting straight up. I'm being cautious, and I'm not anywhere really near the knife to get cut. I think you have to be careless in order to do that, but sometimes we don't pay attention to things in the kitchen, and you're putting your knife in a position that you can easily cut you or someone else. And if I had little kids or something, I certainly wouldn't want them in the room while I was doing this. I think that this particular device is expensive too. This was $100 on Facebook, like $97 free shipping, I think it was. But I got it at a discount, and I have no idea if that discount is like what they always charge or if it was specifically a Facebook discount. I couldn't tell you, but they said that it was at a discount of like $30. So this would normally run, according to them on their Facebook page, $130 for these 2 devices, whereas this particular device was only $30. So these 2 stones, this wood holder, and this also has another stone that I can use to make sure that these stones are level, as well as two wire grommets to hold them in place. That was $30 on Amazon. So this thing's $30, can do pretty much the same thing. There's more of a learning curve, and it takes a little longer. But it can do the exact same thing. So again, it depends on what your price point is. I think this is so far a good mechanism to sharpen your knives and keep your knives sharp. Now, I don't know how long those edges will last. I will keep you updated and do a follow-up video on both how long those edges last and how long this lasts, how long this diamond sharpening system that is embedded in this tumbler roller lasts. Because if this thing eventually fails, then how many sharpenings did I get out of $100? So that's something to consider. I'll do a follow-up video in the future, but if this is something that interests you and something you were thinking about picking up, I do say that it works. So it definitely works, and if it's up to you to decide whether or not it's worth the money. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you so much for joining me this week for this product review. If you like this kind of video, this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Definitely hit a thumbs up if you like this or found this useful. And please share this video with anybody who you think might want to see it. All right, so that's going to be it for this week. I'll see you next week with a new video. Until then, season liberally.